Hi, all, and welcome to another talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. I am one of your hosts, Nor Kyle, along with
the other one of your hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
and today is Sunday, November 8th. So we are post-election and such. Yes, so this is a big deal in the US because this election has a lot of weight put upon it in regard to our both domestic politics and international politics, given that Donald Trump has been our president for almost 4 years, and it's been a torturous 4 years, shall we say. But here we are, joining into a new chapter, and we will see how this new chapter goes now that Biden has been elected. And we are trying to scoot Donald Trump out of the White House.
Yeah, great fun. Yeah, it used to be back several years ago, a couple decades ago, we would laugh at other people's elections and how crazy they were. Now we can't say a damn thing.
No, alas, no.
We used to make fun of the Italians.
God. Yeah, we got nothing. We cannot. No, we cannot throw stones.
Yeah, Berlusconi now appears reasonable.
Well, I don't know about reasonable, but certainly
in comparison.
So much talk. What do we want to do a advertising spiel? Would you?
Yes, we do want to do an advertising spiel, and better to do it now.
John Hurley's
oh
here.
My God, John! John is a longtime friend.
Yeah, well,
occasional student. Where is he?
Yes.
Hello, John.
He's connecting to audio. He might not hear you yet.
Yeah, I don't even see a microphone yet.
Here we go.
Anyway.
Thank you for joining us, John. Yes. Glad to have you.
Commercials. What do we got going? We don't have any new programs going at the moment, though we will soon. More announcements about that as they come along.
Yep.
We
do have.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say we do have openings for more one-on-one sessions.
Took the words right out of my If you are lucky, you can get one of the few sessions, one of the few slots left between Noor and I to have private consultations with us, which anybody will tell you is a great, wonderful thing. Cherie will tell you that when we can actually meet at the same time, we have a good time. And it's only $100 an hour. And you will find our, there's an email, info@ninesidedcircle.com down below. You can send us an email for more information. And it's one of the very few things that we make you pay for because our time costs.
Yeah, and most of the things we do are public and free. So when we do, what's that?
By donation. Nothing is free.
That's true. Yeah,
we will accept your well wishes if you don't have any money.
Yeah, and private sessions are one way that we support ourselves financially while also
doing the deep work. Yeah,
getting to do the things that we love doing. So we would love for you to take us up on that offer to explore becoming a adult human being with real freedom to make your own choices and think for yourself in every sense. So there we go.
So such as it is, there's our commercial. Talk with us. You'll like it.
So much talk. What are we discussing today?
I don't know. Noor, what are we discussing?
So we decided we wanted to retouch on having energy to do the work. And what that means for us is making sure that we are using our energy wisely in day-to-day life so that we do have the energy required to make changes in our life and to grow. And every day we may find that we are expending our energy in ways that are not fruitful, that sometimes are harmful. In any case, it's like having a boat that has leaks. You need to find those leaks and plug them before you can safely continue your journey.
Yeah. So now, when we say energy, you may be thinking of some woo-woo thing. There's auras around us and stuff, and we're zapping energy at you. And no, energy is defined literally, if you look it up in a dictionary, the ability to do work. That's what energy is.
Let's go.
Adele. So, energy is
Hi,
the
darling.
ability to do work. Hello, Adele. And it's not only the ability to do work with the small w, but it's the ability to do work with a capital W. Now, let me ask you something. Have you noticed that it's really difficult to make permanent change in yourself? Let's say you have a habit or something that you do that you would like to not do anymore, or something that you would like to do differently, or you would like to add a skill to yourself. Have you noticed that that's difficult?
Yeah, I'm seeing some head nods of recognition there.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? There's Cherie.
Yay, hi.
Sorry, we're just overcome with gratitude that you're here.
So repeat that question. Let's
why
give
do
other
you
people a
think
chance.
that it is so hard to affect real qualitative change in yourself? Now, there's two kinds of change. There's qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative is, oh, I'm smoking 20 cigarettes a day and I want to drop down to smoking 10 cigarettes a day. Qualitative change is, I want to quit smoking and do something completely different instead. So there's a difference between those two things. And we're talking about qualitative change here, not quantitative change. Why is that so hard, do you think? Assuming that you realize that it is hard. Some people might be going, oh, it's easy for me to do that. In which case, more power to you.
I will offer a hypothesis.
Go for it.
Yay! I was going to pick on you anyway, Kayla.
And so when I was little, there was a game called Pick Up Sticks, and we played it on the computer. And you have a bunch of sticks and you kind of throw them on, they are there and you're trying to pick up the sticks one by one. And so my model of it in my head is that when I'm trying to make a permanent change on something, it's like I'm trying to pick up a stick on the bottom, but there are sticks on top that I haven't picked up that's blocking me. So that's kind of the mental model and that I use in my head.
Okay.
Have you played that game, Mushtaq?
Yeah, but in my day, you actually used these long, thin sticks that you threw on the ground and then picked up. That we didn't have computers back then, so we had to do it in real time.
I mean,
that's an interesting analogy, but that's not the reason.
Yeah. I played the real world version too, for the record, and I don't know. I think that's a very interesting analogy, but yeah,
it's a really good analogy because in one sense that outlines the process of what you have to do. But it's not the reason why it's so hard.
Thank you, Palin.
Somebody, Adele.
Adele says, I think it's related to what we have become comfortable with or have used to cope with in life as it is so far. To cope with life as it is so far.
And that's probably correct insofar as it goes. I'm looking for a much more fundamental answer.
Inertia.
Thank you, John. John, you know the answer to this question, so you can jump in.
Yeah, that's it. my one word take.
Mm.
Okay, so let me fill you in on what's going on here. In order to effectively change something within you that is patterned into you, your energy to do work has to be above a certain level. If it is not above that level, you will not make a lasting change. You literally don't have enough energy to do the change. And at a certain level, change is repatterning the way your brain fires. And you have to have something that will overcome what's already burned into the synapses as the way to go. And that requires more energy than most people carry around with them most of the time. This is not a popular thing to say, but I'm pretty sure that it's a true one. So what happens to your energy? Because let's assume that you should have enough energy to make change. Where does it go? Why don't you?
Well, it constantly leaks away to 1,000,001 other things. Everything except the intention.
That. Yeah. So some of the ways that it leaks away are interesting. Every trauma that you hold in your body is held with a certain amount of energy that could otherwise be used for the real work. Let me repeat that. Every trauma that you hold in your body is held with a certain amount of energy that could otherwise be used for real work, which is why when you go and you get some deep tissue work or some of the other things that people can do to release the stuff in the body, you get more energy. And at least for a while, until you learn other ways to waste that energy, you have a little bit of extra to do work with. Does that make sense to people?
Are you
Yeah, Cherie, you're the one I'm looking at here.
Are you talking about the identification with those habits and those things that you come to that certain point, and that identification, meaning it becomes part of your character? Like some people will talk about, it's because I've had this car accident that I can't do blah, blah, blah. It's because I've had this bad relationship, I can't do blah, blah, blah. Or I find it really hard to da, da, da. So if you're always repeating that story and you're reinforcing that, the energy has leaked straight into that, continually making that so hard to move. It's the big stone of inertia that's inside you.
That's
so
part of it.
Yeah, so the motivation to change is not strong enough to just say, I want to. So unless you can identify even an action of what you're going to take, you don't take action because you don't even know what to take the first step, because you're still really comfortable with the sorrow or grief or trauma that you've experienced. And until you can actually say, this is me without it, you don't have enough energy to apply the work.
Let's think for a moment about armoring. Dave, are you with us?
Yeah.
Hello, Dave. Earth to Dave. Come in, Dave.
There you go, Dave.
I'm on Earth at the moment, I think.
Yeah, but you're upside down.
It's true. This is true. Yeah, armoring.
Talk to us about armoring.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the way, at least that I can figure it, is there is a number of different order of layers of energy blocking within at least the physical structure, and liberating any of them releases energy, as Mushtaq was saying. And then, of course, the false eye can recoagulate it and tends to quite quickly, but you can also liberate it, and sometimes it's permanently liberated, and that's how you change qualitatively over time. The armoring is interesting, like I said, in that, how should I put it? A lot of the stuff that I've seen in the physical world goes into tension release and then even into some of these trauma releases, but there are other layers underneath that, I'm pretty sure. And they're the ones I'm kind of interested in. It's even like debating which bit of the body or not they're stuck in at the moment. So there's that aspect too. But I've had a number of these sequential things. So I started with basic physical work, so martial arts, strength training, basic stretching, and they all did a profound change. Like anyone, I think, who's done very good quality training over time will notice some sort of qualitative change. And then I went a little bit more into the like the bodywork stuff with the trauma and the character armor, and that liberated more as well. But then it still wasn't enough. There are other factors involved in there. So that's where some of my work with what I'm calling mind shapes comes in, because I have not seen anyone use purely physical repatterning work to affect that level of structure, because it will eat. It will. So when John said inertia before, I would say my one word, if I had to, and I wouldn't use one word, my one word would be recoagulation, and tied to that is the concept of plurality. Because as soon as you make change with one aspect of it, one of the other heads will try to eat that. And if you're not aware of how that works, the physical work you're doing will get derailed, but it will look like qualitative change from the outside unless you know what you're looking for. And that's where you need to look at the different latticing from physical, very superficial, to deeper physical, and in and in and in, and you need to have all these watching things around it. So for me, it's tied a lot with body, but it's also tied with language and thought patterns and certain other things that are kind of hard to talk about without laying out the book I'm writing behind me. But yeah, it goes way deeper than you think it goes. You open the rabbit hole and it just keeps going and going and
goes
going.
way, way down. I wasn't even going to get into language, but since you mentioned that, that's another place where we trap our energy, because in that we use language to define our reality. How we do that is going to tell our energy what it can and can't do in a weird sort of way, for lack of a better way to describe it. I love your background, Noor.
Thank you. I'm trying something different.
Yeah, I like this. So every habit that you have is, for lack of, I hate to use the new age terms, but every habit is a crystallization of energy in you. And some habits are important, like the habit of breathing is really good. Habit of breathing badly, not so much, but you can change it. But if you want to be able to affect real change within yourself, you have to be able to access this energy. So part of the remedial work is breaking loose from some of these patterns that demand that you hold a lot of energy on them. And trauma is a very good example of this. You know, somebody has had a really horrible traumatic experience, and then they spend huge amounts of energy either trying to stuff that experience down so that they don't have to relive it, or they spend even more energy reliving it over and over again.
Sometimes with the thought that that is healing.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it doesn't actually seem to be. I remember back when it was, oh, relive the trauma so that you can get over it. But what I kept seeing, and what a lot of people kept seeing back in the 70s and 80s when that was a big thing, was all you're doing is re-stimulating the trauma. You're re-traumatizing the person.
Yep.
So would this be related in some ways to the phenomenon of disassociation during trauma, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it very well can be.
Yeah, I mean, dissociating during, you know, incidences where you are reliving a trauma mentally, it's like being cut off from the embodied experience, which sometimes is, especially in when it's happening to you, that can be your best coping strategy. But if we depend on that over and over again, it's kind of like we don't get to dismantle the experience in a way that actually not only takes its charge away, but resolves it. It's just kind of like you're coming up against that wall and you're not really doing anything about that blockage. So while we are talking about reliving it just to relive it, yeah, that's definitely not a good thing. You're just kind of reactivating all of those neural networks and everything. And yet, some of the types of coping skills we use to avoid getting at them at all are equally detrimental. I guess that's my point. Yeah. So what do we do instead? How do we work through that then?
That's a good question. Adele, what do you think?
And it's funny that you called on me because I was typing in the chat.
Yeah, let's hear your lovely voice.
Okay. One thing I was gonna type is that I do believe that dissociation is the brain protecting you a little bit. It's like some type of survival skill. I do think that those certain survival skills like cease to be useful at a certain point as you continue on your like life journey or path. And I think that's why sometimes people end up repeating, like reliving or even attracting energies that also re-stigmatize. And then my question was actually going to be, and I'll ask you what like your question exactly was, but I do believe that the biggest challenge is realizing that you are in an unconscious pattern. And how do you stop dissociating or being even aware that you're dissociating, you know, because of trauma. Yeah. But yeah, that's what I was going to write in the chat. And if you don't mind, can you repeat the exact question that you had asked me?
I guess my thought was, instead of shutting down or getting stuck in the replay, let's say, of a trauma experience, what might we do instead in order to unravel that knot, that tangle?
Yeah. So after identifying that you're replaying, it's through conversation, through I believe seeking professional help, getting a psychotherapist to even like turn the mirror onto you so that you're aware of these things happening. But then other than that, like just out in life, I think interacting, having people that you can like be mirrors for each other and supportively, I offer support for each other.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
Adele
hard.
makes an interesting point in that things like we think of dissociation as bad, and it's neither good nor bad. I can tell you, having had a kidney stone, that when I was laying there in the hospital, I was dissociating like a son of a bitch.
Right.
I wanted to be completely out of my body until the doctors figured out how to make it stop hurting.
Yeah.
And that worked real good for me. I just sort of stepped back, let the body do its thing, did not pay attention to it, dissociated from the pain. But afterwards, I had to reassociate with my body. And that actually surprisingly took a little work, because the act of dissociation is very powerful. And so you have to remember, dissociate, reassociate.
Right. Yeah.
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 There's some equivalency or what the relationship would be between the dissociation that comes from trauma and the sleep state.
Yes. Yeah, dissociation is definitely going to sleep in a very particular way.
And I think Adele had a good point saying that you really can't do anything about it unless you're aware of it.
Mm.
And the
Yeah.
practices, allow you that space to see patterns arising, whether it's in the body or in the mind or overall, and how those are related, that sort of thing. So, I mean, the first step is to recognize it, to name it, for lack of a better term, to see it.
Agreed. And this can be done for oneself, but I think in order to develop the skill set necessary and to have the self-compassion necessary to do that, that can take help from friends, from supportive relatives, from a healthcare professional, spiritual counselor, that kind of thing. So that's where help becomes critical, is building that skill set, having that mirror, as Adele said. Those things are very powerful.
Adele has another interesting question here.
Yes. Adele asks, as sleep might be considered dissociation, so too meditation?
And the answer is some meditations, yes, some meditations, no. If you want to do TM, that's dissociative.
That's transcendental meditation.
Yes,
for those
that's
who don't
where
know.
you are given a little bija mantra for a whole lot of money, and you sit and you chant until you go into a trance and dissociate from everything.
Mhm.
They're going to deny that that's what they do, but that's what they do. Other meditations like Zen meditation is the exact opposite of that. Zen meditation, you're working on just being there, just being present. Taoist meditation, same thing. So it depends on what you're doing. So let me also suggest to you that this ability to lock energy up inside of you goes down to even the way you move. See Paylan shaking her head up and down. Right? Speak to us, Paylan.
Oh man. I remember earlier this year when I looked at a photo of me from a few years ago. I was literally crooked. I had a shoulder that was really high.
Computering.
I'm sorry.
Was that from like using the computer and stuff?
You know, I had a lot of tension held in the body. I still have a lot of tension held in the
Mm.
body. I still have a ton of work to do myself, but it's just the experience of everything being very rigid, the muscles being very tense, everything being very tense to the point where like I can see it in the mirror, but I don't even, because I don't even know that there's a different state, that I'm not even aware of how tense and how like just rigid I am. And it definitely affects the way I move. I mean, I also had a back injury a few years ago just because like everything's just so tight.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because if you remember, I took a video of you just after you learned the first palm change. And when we got up to a year, I'm going to send that to you to watch.
Oh man.
And then you can see how far you've come.
Yeah. It's very likely that you will be pleasantly surprised, you know. Yeah.
So the remedial part of the work is to free the energy that is bound within the systems of you. That can take a little time because you have to confront trauma, you have to break up sensory motor amnesia in your body, you have to do all of these things. The second part of the work, the beginning of the generative part of the work, is learning to generate more energy and to conserve it for your need rather than wasting it. Now, somebody say, "Tell me, oh wise and great master, how do I do this?" Damn it. I keep hoping somebody's going to fall for that at some point. Yeah, seriously. How do you do that? How do you begin to generate more energy? You all know the answer to this, whether you know or not.
I know conscious relaxation is certainly a part of it.
Yep.
Conscious releasing of chronic tension.
Yep. That's still in the remedial, though. We're talking about the generative. Let's say you've released all the tension that you can release at the moment and things are feeling pretty groovy. What do you do next?
Observe yourself, remember yourself, the other practices. Use that energy and pour it into the other practices.
Yep. Now, one of the reasons that we teach the Enneagram is because the Enneagram is a tool that you can use to know how to generate the energy for work. And you go, what? Did you ever tell us about that? And the answer is yes, I did. Anytime you make an intention to do something and you consciously do that thing, you create energy. And the energy goes like this. There are three parts to the energy that is generated in doing an intention. One part goes to doing the intention itself. So if your intention is to consciously walk to the store, then you release a certain amount of energy in the walking to the store. One part of the energy goes to what Mr. Gurdjieff called the reciprocal maintenance of the universe, because we all have an obligation to the whole, and we all pay that obligation whether we want to or not. And so 1/3 of the energy of conscious work goes to reciprocal maintenance. But the last third you get to keep. The last third you get to keep for work. So you end up with a net gain. And you're going, wait, 3/3, that's a whole, but they aren't exactly equal. They aren't equal thirds. They're like when Noor and I have a pie and I get to cut it, one piece will be bigger than the others.
Yep.
And then I give that to
And
her.
yeah, he does. It's very sweet. So how does this play out when we're talking about the energy released in a completed intention?
Whom are you addressing this question?
To you.
To me? Why am I
Yeah.
going to come up with the answers? You come up with the answers. Tell us. Oh, wise and beneficent one.
Well, the energy that comes out of that for us is energy that we can put towards the next goal that we set our intention toward.
Yep,
It snowballs. Yep.
it's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever we do with the work requires intention.
Mm-hmm.
And because through the use of the Enneagram, we understand how the octave of energy works when we do something, we know exactly where to work really hard and exactly where to relax and let it happen. And that saves us a lot of energy. So this is why in the work, the Enneagram is so important. To understand the law of 7 and the law of 3, that gives you the key to releasing a lot of the bound energy you have and to making more energy, to begin to get a return on the energy investment that you make in the world. Because we're not a closed system. We don't live in a closed system. We live in an open system. Energy comes in from the outside, and we either use it correctly or we squander it. That one quote, Phelan, that you wrote out today, you wrote it out in Chinese, but it sort of translates as wandering about or the roundabout way. You remember that, but you had a better translation. Would you talk a moment about that? Because that's kind of how the Enneagram works.
So you're talking about the Sun Tzu quote, right? Sun Tzu mentions in Chinese, like a transliteration is like the winding path is a straight path. And then, like I mentioned today, that another way to think about it is the indirect path is the direct path.
Yes. And in Chinese?
以喻为直.
Yeah, so much meaning in 3 little syllables. 4 little syllables. Yes. So think about that. The Enneagram shows you an indirect path because it's not even, it's not step by step. There are these places where the energy retards, where things want to wander. And I love that idea of the indirect path is the direct path. It's very Sun Tzu. So here we have it. Energy is something that it is your job to accumulate. And you accumulate it to use it. If you want to be awake, Get your energy up. Awakeness requires more energy than sleep.
Naturally.
Yeah. And that's the fundamental thing is, if you want to be able to hold the awakened state for any length of time at all, you need the energy to do it. It's work. Being awake is work in a very real sense. And you have to strengthen yourself to the point where you can do that work. That requires doing the remedial stuff, working on body, mind, and spirit to release places where you hold energy that you don't need to be holding. Some of that involves releasing trauma. But after you get through the remedial work, you have to do the generative work. Think of it as if you've been injured. And so you go to a physical therapist and they do the remedial work. They get your muscles back into shape. They get your range of motion where it needs to be again. After they're done with you, then it's your job to become stronger in a balanced, healthy way. It's your job to become more flexible. It's your job to increase your mobility. It's your job to move your body outside the box.
Yeah. I think the same thing can be said about psychotherapy as well. Your therapist gives you the support and the tools, but the growing is up to you. They can't carry that for you.
So that's what we have for our talk today. And we will now open the floor to questions or answers. We like answers. Noor and I are not the only smart people sitting here.
We've had some really excellent contributions tonight. I really like that. Thank you. But yeah, if anyone has any additional thoughts to add, questions, please do share.
And we'll probably call on you. We'll loud talk you. Drop your name. That's Noor's job. Calling.
Putting people on the spot. Yeah, seems to be. Speaking of, Zainab, how you feeling about tonight's talk? What's coming up for you?
I have a question. Where does self-remembering fall into in this?
Self-remembering is a practice by which you can gain more energy. When you are doing self-remembering, what they call self-remembering, you are entering into the awake state. Self-observation is where you discover where you're holding stuff, for instance. Self-remembering is where you're beginning to teach yourself to wake up. That's the generative part. Self-witnessing is when you are working in the awake state. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Thanks, Zainab. I'm glad you shared your question. Mustaqim, what's coming up for you?
I don't have any question at all, but I was thinking are there any shortcuts like to get into energy?
There are.
Chanting some mantra maybe to get the energy.
Well, you know Tanaga Dalam. You know that word or those words? For those people who don't speak Bahasa, can you translate it for us?
Tenaga dalam is I can't find the correct words in English. Maybe like inner energy.
Yeah, inner
Uh,
energy. Hit the energy of the inside. Dalam is an Arabic word that means the hidden, the inner. Tenaga, you can use that for any kind of energy, right? Electricity, heat, that sort of thing. So tenaga dalam is inner energy developed through work. Now, your culture has all sorts of different ways of developing that. Some of which are really quick, some of which not so much. But the ones that are quick, you pay a price for.
I was just going to say, I wonder if there's a reason why there aren't more people taking those shortcuts, let's say.
Because if you, okay, imagine that you have a clogged pipe and you start trying to pump more and more water through this pipe, but it's clogged. What happens? Anybody? What happens?
Backs up.
Pressure
backs up.
buildup. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll get you might get a little bit more water coming past that clog, but the pressure behind the clog gets really bad and it might explode, which is amusing, especially if it's a sewer pipe. So every place in your body that you have energy blocked in one level or another is a clog. And if you try and push too much energy past that without dealing with the clog, the same thing happens. So yes, there are quick ways to generate lots and lots of tenaga dalam. And if you do it wrong, you will hurt yourself.
What
And
might that,
drive yourself crazy.
what would that look like to come up against harm by doing something like that?
I knew a guy who did that sort of thing once. I'm not going to mention his name because he's still around. But the first time I met him, he spent all of his time talking to Jinn because he asked Jinn to teach him how to do tenaga dalam, and they basically ate his mind. He could do amazing things. His silat was really, really good, but he was completely nuts, and not nuts in the common way. I mean, I know regular nuts. I know every kind of crazy you can think of, and what he had was not that. What he had was his mind became obsessed by jinn, by these spiritual forces, because it was just too easy for them to glom onto him.
Question on that. Was
Yes.
it he was glommed onto Jinn, and I don't know what Jinn is, or is it
Yeah, we should.
glommed onto him?
Jinn are spiritual. Think of disincarnate entities. Most of the time, I consider disincarnate entities to be complete bullshit. But every now and again, you run across the real thing. As Rumi said, if there were no real gold, you would not recognize fool's gold. You wouldn't need fool's gold. So for every 1,000 people who have some sort of trick where they're going to pretend that they're in touch with disincarnate entities, some poor fool ends up actually doing it, and they usually pay a terrible price for it. And it's not necessary that the jinn were malicious. They're just so weird that your mind cannot wrap yourself around it. At least that's what my teacher thought, and he's rarely wrong about these things. So, yeah, there is the easy way, but I don't recommend it. It goes back to the indirect method is the direct method. And the other way to really raise your energy is send me $1 million American. And I guarantee you, when you realize that you just sent me $1 million for nothing, your energy will be raised so high. I am, of course, kidding. All right, other questions?
Nancy,
Oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
Nancy and John will have you after. What's up, Nancy?
Okay. You may have covered this already, but I think I'm in a fight about raising energy where I'm up against a huge amount of resistance to doing it.
Yeah, I didn't quite cover that.
Okay.
And the question there has to be, Zainab has to take off. Goodbye,
Yeah.
Zainab.
She already disappeared, but she got away from Sheree
Okay.
and stuff, so we
So
acknowledged her.
yes, if you have a lot of stuff that you're sitting on, raising the energy will churn that up, and you might resist doing it. So a little bit at a time, and knowing what you want to work on.
Mm. Yep. Thanks, Nancy.
That was
Good
a good
question.
question.
Yeah. John, you wanted to speak?
I just wanted to clarify so you talked about the remedial and the generative portions of, the work of building energy, of waking up. I'm assuming they're not, sequential. You don't have to deal with all your trauma. It kind of happens at the same time as you begin to,
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, it would be very hard to delineate what exactly is remedial and what exactly is generative, because it's kind of like a Venn diagram where there's this middle stuff where you're really working on both simultaneously.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a home loan. When you buy a home and you start paying off the loan on your home, in the beginning, most of that payment goes to interest and only a little bit goes to the principal. But as you progress, more and more of that payment goes to the principal. It's a little bit like that.
I've also noticed that as you work and accumulate this energy, particularly from intention, there does seem to be a certain sensation with it.
Yeah.
Of having it. And I don't know, other than to continue to work in the same way, what to do with that. And maybe that's the answer. So I don't know.
Yeah, you don't need to do anything with it other than enjoy it.
Yep.
The thing is, you will notice it as you build more ability to work and more energy to do work with. Not only will you notice it, but the people around you will notice it. And this is where you find out the quality of your friends, because you'll get one of two reactions, or one of three reactions. Some people are so oblivious they won't even notice the difference. Some people will notice the difference and be excited about it. Damn, you're much better these days. Some people will notice the difference and not like it very much and want you to bleed your energy off so that you get back down to the level that you were at before.
Yep.
Probably try to avoid that last class.
What's that, John?
I was just saying you should probably try to avoid that last class of person.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely what's the word I'm looking for? It's something to notice and to take account of and consider, what is the impact of this person's attitude towards my, the way that I'm shaping my life intentionally.
Yeah. And when you make real generative change, it's a threat to people, to some people.
To some people, yeah.
To some people. So Dave, what were you thinking?
I have experienced these things. That's what I've been thinking. I'm also thinking it's amusing because I'm 90-something% of the way through a very big piece of work I'm about to release that's kind of on this stuff, and not kind of, but like quite on it. But like when we were talking before, I can't really just go, well, that's that. So maybe next time we do this, I can add in some more fun bits, because I've been investigating this stuff for a number of years now, and I found some interesting things that might be
This is
helpful.
why I keep calling on you, because we all need to know the interesting things that you found.
I think one of them is actually, like, if you look at some of the sutras, where's the one that is at the moment? The Yoga Vasita, for instance.
Yeah.
There's a line in it where it talks about a few things that will raise energy, like the company of sages, or breath practice, or work upon the vasana. And there's these bits, and it kind of goes, there's a particular line that I found interesting, which is work on breath practice or vasana and choose whichever one you like. Whereas I've actually noticed a very interesting thing in that people can have ridiculously good mechanisms of breathing and still be like incredibly sedimented, because the energy they generate from the breath practice gets bound by their lack of ability to see the Vasana minds interacting with that.
Yes.
And that's
what you mean by what the term Vasana means?
Yeah, it's like karmic impressions below the threshold of conscious perception for most people. And it has an interesting reciprocal interaction with awareness. So you need to have sufficient voltage of awareness to actually access and burn off some of these things, but they themselves will try to recoagulate that thing as you're trying to do it. They also themselves are formed of bound awareness, which as it liberates, kind of levels you up, so to speak. So this is where the maps like the Enneagram and what I'm talking about when I say mind shapes come into play, because it tells you precisely how you're going to waste your energy.
Yep, exactly that. And you and I have actually talked about this, John, but the term that I use is a related one, which is samskara. Samskara means subliminal memory trace. And it's related to what he's talking about. They're not exactly the same, but they're close. So if you think back to those talks, you will remember something akin to what he's speaking of.
Definitely. Yeah, obviously, those are buried pretty deep. I mean, so you have to have that, what to call it, that slowing down of the arising of the contents of consciousness, or I'm not sure how to phrase it.
You're doing good.
Yeah.
To begin to see those things.
Yes.
But how important is it to like find the root? I mean, almost in like a psychological sense, they say, oh, well, something happened to you when you were a kid. How important is that?
That's less important than it is to break the habit
of
the samskara.
I would actually say as well that the particular ones cluster and layer that I focused on, I do not in any way believe they are traumatic. I think they're atraumatic. They're not related to traumas. Or at least they're related to the trauma that is civilization.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say
they're not personal things. They're not things you pick up, but trauma is real and does exist and also interfaces with this. So it's this big, like, shifting lock barrel of consciousness that you have to pick.
Well, I assume we all have some level of trauma.
Yeah.
So.
Probably, but Dave is making an important distinction here that we haven't touched on, in that civilization itself will pattern us. As an old buddy of mine used to say all the time, civilization is not your friend. Civilization creates the boxes in which it wants you to live.
Well, and that was kind of what I was thinking when I said inertia at the beginning, which,
Mm,
is kind of the pressure of everything outside of yourself, all of the ways you're being shown to act and behave and react, that you uh, absorb before you even realize it.
yeah. And I think some people have talked about as a form of collective or cultural trauma, but that's just a framing. That is not the language we necessarily need to use to describe this phenomenon. Yeah.
Well, and Mushtaq, I did want to ask you about I guess, a slightly maybe related topic, and that is like the kind of primal trauma. Like everyone has a trauma, but everyone reacted to their unique first trauma in a certain way, and that set a pattern for them for their whole lives. I wonder if you could talk about that.
Well, that relates back to what Dave was talking about. You can use that kind of knowledge to figure out exactly how somebody is going to waste their energy. And it's a real thing. It happens. But it goes deeper than the personal. And I think that's something that Dave's work is going to hopefully bring out, because it definitely needs to be addressed. We can address all of the personal stuff that we can, but we are trapped inside of a cultural reality tunnel that insists that everything is a certain way and tries to shape us to that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like the metaphor of being living in a insane asylum.
That's a slightly different metaphor, but it may apply. I'm pretty sure that we live in an insane asylum.
Well, or being a sane person dropped in an insane asylum and trying to stay sane.
Well, the interesting thing is that oftentimes if you walk into a psychiatric ward and the staff are not wearing uniforms, you cannot tell the difference between the staff and the patients at first. This is a true thing. The last place I worked at, that was the case. We did not wear nursing uniforms. We worked in street clothes because we were trying to create more of a sense of normality. And people always got confused when they came, who was who? Who are the crazy ones?
Who's acceptably crazy and who is unacceptably crazy? Yeah.
So there we have it. Any more thoughts or questions?
Adele, did
Oops, you go.
I just
Yeah.
noticed, Dave, hold your thought. I definitely want to hear from you in a sec. What were you going to say, Adele?
Yeah, just briefly. I feel like so far every chat that I've been on with you guys in the Nine-Sided Circle has been very timely. It's always kind of aligned with whatever I was delving into or processing in my life, and this is super spot on. Last month was a heavier month as I was transitioning from one thought pattern to another, and I found myself getting so tired, truly, like deeply exhausted. And so like when you're talking about regenerating your energy, I'm like, okay, I would want the shortcuts, tell me what to do, but I do know when you're also saying that, like, you know what to do. We know what regenerates ourselves. It's just carving out the time and the space and making it the priority. And yeah, so love this talk. Thank you.
Thanks, Adele. I'm glad you found it useful. That's definitely something I am very satisfied to hear. Thank you.
And Dave had a thought.
And Sheree is also unmuted, but
Yes.
Dave, you were first.
I was just going to pick up on a little riff that got sparked by Mr. John saying stuff before. For me, Mr. John, for me, the work on the body is super cool in that when you do it properly and it goes deeper and deeper and deeper, you start to be able to sift between different orders of sensations. So it popped up a little bit. Sorry if you guys went there, but in the retreat one with the spanda,
Mm-hmm.
like, so I can feel that and I know what that is compared to other physical sensations. But when you have not as high a quality of physical literacy, you start to mistake certain physical phenomena for what is a slightly more energetic phenomena or something like that. So just starting with the basic body stuff first, besides all the like tension relief and all the millions of other benefits, you start to get a very clear strata of like, this is this, this is this, this is this, this is this, and then you work on, and then like it goes deeper. This is this one as well. This is what that feels like. This is and then you start when you walk around in the world and the sensations appear in your body, you can go, well, that's this phenomena. Why is it there?
Mhm.
And then you can relate it to what's happening in the world or inside and outside at the same time, and it just becomes very useful to have those like latticed fields of different sensations, but you have to be really clear on what they are, and you kind of have to have a reasonably up there body awareness to be able to separate some of these things, or you will confound certain things. Like a lot of people I've met, when they feel something in the chest region, they go, like that's the heart energy. But that's also where confounded emotional energy gets, and you can mistake both of those pretty easily. So separating them out, or you might just have a pec spasm, like they're all in the same geographic area. Like, what are they? They're all kind of strong. Like you might have a heart attack. So there's like the viscera, the breathing, the body, and then all the other interesting stuff there. But if you don't have the body stuff, then the mind, particularly the false self, will want to confound that sensation for the thing it wants to feel.
Yeah.
And that will waste a shit ton of energy. So getting clarity in the body and all its different systems is super, super useful. I've found, at least.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. That's pretty great, actually. Sheree and Travis, I know you're both unmuted. Did you have anything you wanted to share, Sheree?
I was thinking that I try to simplify it down to not thinking or overthinking. The overthinking that undoes me, and I have to go down into my heart. As Dave said, you have to understand or be very observant of the sensation to know whether you're going through your heart or you're getting a pec spasm. So that's actually a real thing. Yeah. So when I get triggered, and it's not through trauma, I made a decision a long, long time ago. I would not live through the lens of the trauma that I've experienced. It's daily life when my partner will say something, and I think I will say something that could be equally spiteful or hurtful or completely reactive. And I'm thinking, no, that's not going to help. But at the same time, if he says something about me that is not correct, I will not accept it. But I say it through another part of my body versus up here, which is quite different. So it can be the way he responds to that initially might be to retort back, but he does come back. And I've noticed that it actually has helped me to recognize that reactivity. And so I haven't wasted energy on being reactive. That's a sort of thing. It's a simple thing. Like we say trauma, but we're not all of us living through our trauma lenses. We're not. It's the everyday stuff that is where we're leaking. And when we're really observant of that and we're awake, we can actually respond to that in a loving way, but it doesn't mean we're doormats. So that's so we don't waste our energy in that way, and we don't feel like we have to justify. That's the other thing I think it can be energy wasting for me, is justification. It's just that I don't know.
I relate to that very much. Thank you for mentioning that, Sheree. Yeah. Thank you. Travis, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, I got two thoughts, and I do have to get going, so I'll talk fairly quickly.
Go for it. Yeah.
First one, something Dave was saying jarred the thought with me that we want to make sure we're not, when we're raising our energy, we're not dumping it back into our stories. You know, I know I mentioned before, I've done a lot of martial arts, and, you know, I've seen people who have, you know, fairly well-developed energies, and they're 20th century Americans, not violence professionals, never been in an adult fight in their adult life, and they're putting their energy into being a 15th century samurai, you know? And, you know, you end up with Cobra Kai, you know? It's not useful, you know? So they're generating something and they don't know where to put it. So that's, you know, I think something to be aware of. The other thought was when we were talking about the energy of intention, you know, generated a thought about, you know, the appropriate use of goal setting. Because, you know, I kind of bought into the whole, like, hey, it's a never ending journey, you know, you just practice and you go, and you keep going. Well, but maybe dialing back a little bit on that and saying, hey, you know, there is going to be progressive steps, you know, and there's a little bit of an intangible nature to it. So the appropriate goals, you know, how you formulate those might take some crafting. But, you know, I think that might be a part where, you know, I at least needed some work, you know, is to say, hey, this is going to be my goal and this is how I'm going to set the intention. And that might be a big missing piece, at least for me. Yeah. That's all.
We call that finding the right question.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So we may have to talk about that again. We did a talk on that a couple of years ago, but it may be time to revisit this.
Yeah, I will make a note about that.
Now.
Thank you, Travis, for your contribution.
All right. Yep. And I'm going to duck out. All right.
All right. Okay. Yeah, we're going to wrap this thing up. So take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
So, folks, it is getting late. We should probably say goodnight and can the recording. So everybody, 1 second here. Let me go to gallery view. And everybody wave, say goodnight, and we'll see you all next week.
Good night.